we were sitting with that koan, I got an image of something like a bus stop. It wasn't very big, and it was clear glass, but there was a little overhang, just a little bit of shelter. And then I thought of images of times when I've felt homeless came to my mind. And I thought of when I was young, um, in high school, and my parents were in turmoil and fleeing here and there. And I wanted to stay with something I knew, and I wanted to stay in the town I lived in, but I didn't have a place that I could be. And so I asked everybody I knew, like, could I stay with you? You know, could I stay at your house? Do you know any place I could stay? I lived in this kind of conservative small town. Um, nobody lived in other people's houses, whatever. It's kind of a crazy idea. Um, I kept asking, and I almost ended up in this one place where an older woman had a room that was like a walk-through room, and I could have maybe been in that room. And I felt, luckily for me, that didn't happen. One day I asked a girl at the bus stop, and and she said, "Well, maybe you could stay with us. You could stay at my house." And a long story short, I did end up staying at this person's house for a couple years, in her brother's room, most of the time, except when he came home, and then I went in the basement. And his room had wallpaper of tigers. It had like all his books in it. He was just off at college, you know. And that sense, I just felt that sense of like going around and asking, kind of like, are you my mother? Are you my home? When I was in college, I one day took mushrooms with somebody. I was convinced to do this, and it seemed an unwise move. Once we did this, and I was not that experienced with it, I realized this was not the person I should be with, and this was not the place I should be. And they were good enough to let me leave them. And then what I did is I wandered all over town, knocking on the doors of everybody I knew, thinking if I could just find a friend to like hang with me till this is over. And no one was home. And in my mind and in my memory, everything I every I knocked on door after door after door, and nobody was home. And so when you were sitting with the koan, perhaps some images came to you, or maybe some thoughts, maybe some feelings about what is it like to be homeless, and what is it like to be at home. And maybe you thought, maybe you didn't, those things didn't occur to you at all, and you were thinking about the football game coming up after the program. And maybe you had an idea about, you know, what you were thinking or feeling. Um, all of those things are for you. You can't really have the wrong images come to you. You know, when you're listening to a talk and you notice that sometimes you're really paying attention, or like Tess will say something like, I really like the story of the young girl who led guided meditations for her mother and how she did that. And I was like, wow, that really jumped out at me. And I think there were other times maybe I wasn't hearing so much. And that's what happens. And that's like, that's it. Like that's your real life. And one of the things, so on the subject of home, Um, you might know, I just bought a house, and it's the first house I've ever bought, and it's absolutely what I want to say, I guess, is that in connection with it, I've been thinking about how much life um, I had a I would have liked to have a home earlier. I'm doing this with my partner who's even older than me, and I'm not young, and it's really difficult. It's really hard, and we really would have thought that a good idea would have been to do this a lot earlier. Um, and we tried, actually, especially him, um, but it just didn't happen. And then all of a sudden, now we have a home. And yesterday, so we both have full-time jobs, and so we bought this little place that we could afford, and we love the land, and it's really beautiful, and we basically are like tearing it apart and trying to rebuild it in our spare time, of which we don't have a whole lot. And yesterday, I well, actually the day before yesterday. So yesterday we were going to go up to the house, and we had these things we needed to do. And one of those things was we have ordered a special pickup of large bulky items on Monday. And so we were going to move this old mattress and box spring and chair and couch to the road. And we had to say specifically like what the items were, and get them out there Saturday for pickup tomorrow. So Friday, I get a call from a friend who's just calling to say hello. And then they say, "Oh, if you ever need to borrow my truck, you could do that, and that'd be fine." And I go, "Oh, yeah? How about tomorrow?" and and so anyway, this nice friend actually lent us their truck yesterday, and we used it to take some things to the dump and also to do this task of moving these really heavy items to the front street. And all the time I was doing, I was thinking, what did we think? What did we think we were going to do without this truck? There was no way. We have a little SUV, would never fit any of these items in it. And we're not stupid. Like, we usually plan ahead and think, and yet in this instance, we had this plan that these things had to get to the road, and no mechanism by which it was going to happen. And in this particular case, something appeared, and it was this truck. And that doesn't mean that like the truck had to appear. Like, maybe the truck might not have appeared, and then something else would have happened. But so there was another thing about the experience of borrowing the truck. So I was really appreciative of this truck. And so we got the truck. The truck, of course, was like full of gas. The meter was absolutely at full. It was a kind thing that someone would do, lend you a truck. And it was great. It was perfect. It was wonderful. And it was time to return it. And all my programming about sort of how do you show gratitude and how do you find yourself in community was like, well, the first thing, we should definitely fill up the truck with gas, so that will, not like the person needs this money, but just as a way of like doing what I'm supposed to do. But then I didn't end up doing that because it would have made us late, and it was like, whatever. So then we arrive to return the truck, and we pull in, and we hear this crunch. And there had been these, we drove right over these like drainage pipe things that were running across their driveway, and it was dark, and they had this beautiful house, and we were kind of admiring the house, and we destroyed like this thing that was there, right? So we're doing well here. So then, what else did we do? I guess we were driving home, and then we realized, oh, we hadn't like reorganized something for them that we were supposed to do. And then I started thinking, well, gosh, they were so nice, and maybe I wasn't very thoughtful in my conversation that I had with them. And I was trying to fix it with my friend. I started sending texts like, I'm so sorry, and thank you so much, and all of this stuff, and um, none of that was helping. And what I wanted to say about this is, so this was an example of that, trying to um, manage how things went, manage my place and my relationships and stuff. And I'm getting a little bit lost in what I'm trying to say here. It's like what's underneath it. What I'm trying to say is that everything is happening underneath, despite all of what we think are our efforts. And our efforts aren't useless or meaningless. They're like a key way in which everything is happening. But what gets in the way and causes suffering and causes sort of less fluidity is the ideas about whether we're doing it right and whether this is the way it's supposed to go, and the idea that we should have it figured out and know how to make our friends like us, and know how to get a house at the right time, and know how to be accepted, and know how to be a good Zen student, and know how to give a talk, and know all of these things. And while they're all sort of things we can learn about and maybe do a little bit better in a certain way and on a certain level, it's like deep underneath, and this is the silence before, the silence, the great silence. It's not about that. The thing that really holds you and really keeps you at home is not about how it turns out, how you're doing, whether you're doing it right or wrong. It's just simply not about that. And I was recently in a conversation, and somebody was talking about that, you know, uh, you often will hear somebody say in a Dharma talk, this moment is enough. What's happening is enough. Whatever you have here is enough. And this morning I got into my car and the thought came to me, and whatever you have is also not enough. And sometimes when you think about that the opposite is already true, instead of that's not a problem. It's like it's freeing, because you realize, yeah, in a certain way, it's not enough and never will be enough. And so why keep trying in that small little way? It's like, what is enough? Enough in what? Enough. And it just is. And if you're not trying to make it enough or not enough, then you have a better chance of seeing what it is. And what has life got in store for you, despite all of your plans and all of the things that you think it should be doing? You are part of it. Everything about life is coming through you. So it's like, it's not maybe like practice what might be sort of your responsibility is to pay attention and notice, but it's not to make it turn out a certain way. It's like to see, well, what wants to come through, and what is actually here outside of my opinions about it. But like the less even with my house, I'm afraid of things going well. And I kind of like this house. And I'm really hoping that I'm going to get to move in, and we're going to live there and be really happy. And then there's a part of me that very bringing up that image makes me afraid something bad will happen. And I have to keep reminding myself, well, I have it right now. Like what I have right now, this is good. I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and it's enough. I was looking at my computer, and I found this thing. I think John Tarrant wrote a long time ago, and read at the opening of an integrative medicine building like 15 years ago. and I'm going to share it with you. It was called Healing is Like Kissing. And because they were doctors and they were healing. And I thought, and I read it and I thought, well, that could also be, you just substitute life for healing in this poem. And so I'm going to read it. I'm going to say life. Take your pick, which word you hear. Life is like kissing. It can be done mechanically on the way to somewhere you think is more interesting. But it's best done for its own sake, like breathing, like looking at the person in front of you, as if they were the only one in the world, which at this moment they are. Life, you might think, is a whir of beautiful machines, and that's fine. But for me, it means I stop and don't rush about so much. Life is a question, too. Something like, granting the difficulty of this world, what do I really want? And the answer turns out to be everything. The running boy, the owl calling at midnight, the white, perfumed narcissus pushing up through snow, the afternoon blue, and then a thin, translucent yellow. This evening, this morning that we have together. I want what's happening now. What I want is for the world to kiss me back. And with that, I turn it over to Allison.